What's more, I think Joe actually went too far in his apology about using the N-word. It's totally understandable that he did, because he's been taking a tremendous amount of fire. Even the White House came after him this week. It's been completely crazy. So I understand why he felt the need to disavow his prior use of the word entirely. But let me take a moment to spell out why I think that's a mistake. There's simply no question that American hysteria around the use of the N-word is pathological and dishonest and destructive of people's integrity and an offense to basic sanity. I remember an example over 20 years ago, long before social media and, of course, long before we spoke of cancel culture. We would have called it political correctness back then, where an aide to the mayor of Washington, D.C. used the term niggardly in a speech. Niggardly is a synonym for stingy, and it has no etymological connection to the N-word. Okay, needless to say, some genius in the audience got mightily offended, and the controversy was such that the mayor's aide resigned, and the mayor accepted his resignation. This person was later reinstated in another role, I think. But it's a sign of how far we've wandered from the path of progress that the NAACP at the time recognized just how absurd and demeaning of its own interests the initial taking of offense was. Julian Bond, who was the chairman of the NAACP, said, quote, "You hate to think that you have to censor your language to meet other people's lack of understanding." And then he said, "Seems to me that the mayor has been niggardly in his judgment on the issue." Okay, that was great, right? That was decent. That was sane. Needless to say, we could not expect such a reasonable response from the NAACP today. Here's what I think is patently true, morally and intellectually, and therefore politically, in the end. The idea that a white person cannot say the N-word for any reason when discussing its use, when reading Huckleberry Finn out loud, when dissecting public controversies of the sort that I'm discussing now, is completely insane. To hold this view is to attribute magical properties to words. It's the very essence of a childish relationship to language. And it makes a mockery of the very real social problem of racism, that is, bigotry as applied through the lens of race. And leaving aside the question of systemic racism, because there's a lot to debate about the scope of that problem today. I don't deny that it still exists, and what has always been pernicious about systemic racism is that the people implementing racist policies need not be consciously racist to perpetrate further harm. But of course, the pendulum has also swung violently in the other direction. And as I've said before on this podcast, I think it's safe to assume that there is almost no desirable place to work or study or mingle in American society today. In academia, in film or television or journalism or tech, you could literally take the highest status 20% of every corner of our culture. There is almost no place, and perhaps there is no actual place at all, where being a person of color isn't a positive advantage for gaining entry in the year 2022. Of course, this excludes Asians, who are now white adjacent. Again, there's a lot to debate about the ethics of all this, and there are certainly questions about affirmative action and related policies where I don't even know what I think. But we can leave all of that aside, because that's not the sort of racism we're talking about. The racism of which Joe Rogan has been accused is real racism, psychological racism. He likes white people better than black people racism. When we're talking about a person using the N-word to convey his racism, or using it in such a way as to reveal his racism, whether he meant to or not, then everything depends on the beliefs and intentions of the speaker. To know if a person is racist, we have to know what he thinks and feels about other human beings. Most importantly, we have to know what sort of world he wants to live in. To allege that a person is racist is of necessity to claim that he cares about the variable of race in ways that he shouldn't, that he prefers certain groups of people for reasons that he shouldn't, that he takes pride in things he shouldn't, and that he has contempt, or at least disregard, for certain people based purely on the color of their skin or some other superficial racial characteristic. Real racists don't want people of other races to truly succeed, and they feel more or less compassion for the suffering of other human beings based primarily on their racial identities. This is why the "some of my best friends are black" calumny is so silly and destructive. If a person is white and some of his best friends are black, I don't care what jokes he laughs at. He is not a racist in any way that society should worry about. And if you doubt that, there is something you don't understand about what it means to have good friends. So, using the N-word as a racial slur is completely different from using it in some other way. And if you insist that the word itself is magically destructive, like Voldemort in the Harry Potter novels, if you insist upon treating its use by a person of the wrong skin color, in any context, for any purpose, as some kind of diabolical incantation, if you really believe that someone, somewhere, will be harmed by any conceivable use of the term based merely on the color of the speaker's skin, you are just morally unprepared to solve real problems in our world. And any culture that takes this attitude is morally unprepared to solve real problems, too. And that's where I'm afraid we are. We are mired in a culture that appears totally unable to even identify, much less solve, real problems, because it has grown hysterical over imaginary ones. There were other things that Joe apologized for in this second video. Things which it sounds like he should have apologized for. These were things he said as a comedian that now sound bad even in context. He told jokes in the past that he wouldn't tell today. It's only decent to notice, however, that literally everyone, not just comedians, everyone, is in this spot because the norms have shifted massively. You simply can't judge comedy or any other cultural product from 10 years ago by the sensitivities of today. It's just not fair to, because it doesn't give an accurate picture of a person's state of mind, then or now. And most important, if you watch Joe's recent video, there is no question that he offered a complete apology for things he genuinely regrets saying. What more could we expect a well-intentioned person to do?